We're trying to find the solutions to the given equations. Now you may use your unit circle if you would like. We are trying to find out the cosine of what angle gives us a square root of 3 over 2. Well, we first should notice that the cosine of the angle is positive. From our lesson before, we should know that this is going to put our answers in either the first or fourth quadrant. So we're going to get two answers. So let's go ahead and answer this. If I draw a coordinate system, and if I draw some random angle theta, I know that its x-coordinate is going to be the square root of 3 over 2. Well, the y-coordinate was 1/2. Now, which angle gave us these coordinates? It was the pi over 6's. So pi over 6 puts us into the first quadrant. So my first angle is going to be pi over 6. If I go around the circle in the second quadrant, the pi over 6 becomes 5 pi over 6. In the third quadrant, it's 7 pi over 6. And in the fourth quadrant, we have 11 pi over 6. So that's going to give me my fourth quadrant angle as well, 11 pi over 6. If we go to the sine, now we're saying that the sine value of the angle is negative square root of 3 over 2. So like before, we know that the sine of theta is less than 0. That will put our answer in the third or fourth quadrant. So drawing my unit circle, I always start off in quadrant 1, the angle. This time, my y value is negative square root of 3 over 2. Well, that correlates to an angle of pi over 3. And if I draw my angles in my second quadrant, that's going to give us 2 pi over 3. And in the third quadrant, 4 pi over 3. And in the fourth quadrant, 7 pi over 3. And we have our answers. 4 pi over 3 for the third quadrant, and 7 pi over 3 in the fourth quadrant. Cosecant, we don't really know much about cosecant yet, but we do know its flip. This is the flip of sine of theta. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write cosecant as the sine of theta, and I'm actually going to flip the right side of our equation to make it negative 1/2. Sine is again negative, so we know our answers have to be in either the third quadrant or the fourth quadrant. So let's go ahead and find those. Well, where my y value is 1/2, we know that's going to hopefully be at the angle for pi over 6. So I go through pi over 6. In the second quadrant, that's going to be 5 pi over 6. In the third quadrant, 7 pi over 6. And in the fourth quadrant, 11 pi over 6. So that gives my angles. The pi over 6 in the third quadrant is 7 pi over 6. And the fourth quadrant, it's 11 pi over 6. Those are my two answers. 7 pi over 6 in the third quadrant, and 11 pi over 6 in the fourth quadrant. Just using your unit circles. For cotangents, and I really don't know much about cotangent, but if I flip it, it becomes tangent of theta, and this becomes 1 over the square root of 3. Now, tangent is going to be positive in the first quadrant and the third quadrant. Now, where does tangent equal 1/3? That's a little tougher to do. So I'm going to work with what tangent means. Remember, tangent is sine over cosine, and both sine and cosine are going to have something over 2. So I just want to make sure I get the 3 on bottom. So to do that, I'm going to, 1/2 over root 3 over 2. The 2's are going to cancel. So really what I'm looking for is where the sine of the angle equals 1/2. And from problem number 3, we know that's going to be at the pi over 6's. So we get pi over 6, 5 pi over 6, 7 pi over 6, 11 pi over 6. And again, I want the first quadrant, which is 1 pi over 6. There's our first angle. And our third quadrant becomes 7 pi over 6. Tangent and cotangent do take some practice, so you'll definitely want to look those over and try those again and again and again. They're the hardest ones that you're going to have to do. For questions 5 and 6, we have to do a little bit of algebra. We're going to treat the sine of x like it's a variable all by itself. So it's like I'm solving the equation. 1 plus 2x equals 0. So we're going to isolate the sine of x, and that's going to give us negative a half. Now we already have this answer. We did this one for number 3, so we don't need to reinvent the wheel, hopefully. Now this is going to be in the third quadrant and the fourth quadrant. In the third quadrant, of course, the angle, again, from number 3, is 7 pi over 6. And in the fourth quadrant, we should have 11 pi over 6. For number 6, same thing, we're going to solve it. Isolate the cosine, and we get the cosine of x equals negative square root of 3 over negative 2. Of course, those two negatives become positive. Okay? Just like if you want to tell somebody that they did something wrong, tell them they did 2 things wrong. It becomes a positive. Anyways, we actually have this answer already from question number 1. So we know cosine is positive in the first and fourth quadrant. And from number 1, again, don't reinvent the wheel. You already have those answers. Pi over 6, and we get 11 pi over 6. All right. This lesson will be done on Monday, but here's a quick look ahead if you want to see it, if you want to try it.